The heart of American operations in Iraq, of course, is the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Right now, the U.S. is mobilizing troops to protect the compound. There are hundreds more on standby, as well as dozens of helicopters. Our Tom Foreman takes a closer look at what's at stake.
If you look at a map of Iraq, you can see that Baghdad is more or less in the middle of the country. And if you look at a map of Baghdad in the middle of the city, you can find the very heavily protected green zone. That's where the U.S. Embassy is, bordered on the south side by the Tigris River. This was completed in 2009 at a cost of about $750 million, biggest embassy in the world. And of course, it is guarded on all sides. There are barricades, there are switchbacks, and there are guard posts at every place that you might get inside this giant blast wall designed to protect it from any sort of attack. The man presiding over all of this is Ambassador Stephen Beecroft. He lives inside here. There are also a half dozen apartment buildings for the staff, and there are scores of offices to handle everything from trade deals to visas to diplomatic relations, even to agriculture. There are about 5,600 workers who labor each day behind these fortified walls, this bulletproof glass with military troops standing by to protect them in the event of an attack. And they really can't leave here without heavy guard almost all the time. As a result, this is a place where they have to have everything they need. There is a swimming pool, there are tennis courts, there is a cafeteria, there's even a movie theater, and the ability to generate their own water and power, all part of the cost of doing business in a very dangerous part of the world.
Tom Foreman reporting for us. Thank you. So what options does the United States have to make sure those people at the U.S. Embassy are protected? There are other Americans, lots of them, in other places of Iraq. Let's bring in the former Deputy National Security Advisor and the former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, James Jeffrey. Ambassador, thanks very much for joining us. Can you believe we're even talking about security at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad right now, and the fear that those 5,000 Americans who are there could be endangered, may have to be evacuated? What does that say to you?
What it says is that there is a breakdown in the overall security of the host nation. At the end of the day, the host nation has the primary responsibility. When that begins melting away, as we see now, the president and his top advisors are going to focus on this night and day. This isn't Benghazi, Wolf. They're doing everything they can under these circumstances to ensure that the embassy remains safe, but the underlying situation, particularly places like Baquba and to the south of Baghdad, falling under the sway of the ISIS, is a danger to essentially cut off and besiege the city. That's worry number one. The
president yesterday announced, he wrote to Congress as part of the War Powers Act, that he was dispatching 275 combat-equipped U.S. troops to the embassy area, that so-called green zone, to protect Americans. 275 doesn't sound like a whole lot, but here's a question. I don't know if you know the answer off the top of your head. Do these American combat forces who are now being dispatched to Baghdad, will they have immunity from Iraqi prosecution? Because that was the big sticking point when all U.S. troops were withdrawn, as far as that status of forces agreement that never really materialized.
It's a very good question, Wolf, but in an emergency situation, the president, as commander-in-chief, can do everything under the Constitution to protect Americans, and that's the underlying reason why those American troops are now there.
When I hear 275 are on the way, I begin to worry that could just be the beginning. There may be a whole lot more troops needed. Is that your fear as well?
It's not my fear. First of all, the president has promised no American boots on the ground other than these, and that's a valid position. What he has to consider, and I'm sure they are considering, is to use air power to stop this drive on Baghdad itself. If they can do that, that will stabilize the situation, relieve the pressure on us for the embassy, and most importantly, preclude Iran from intervening with significant ground troops on the side of the largely Shia government. That's the immediate problem. The political situation and what to do with the huge chunk of Iraq under ISIS control now, that's a longer-term problem.
You think this is the beginning of the end of Nouri al-Maliki in Iraq?
I think that Nouri al-Maliki has a very uncertain future as Prime Minister.
Because on top of everything else today, his office issues a statement accusing Saudi Arabia of being behind this ISIS, this terrorist attack on Iraq. What do you make of that decision by the office of the Prime Minister in Baghdad?
There's always been bad relations between the Maliki government and King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, and the fault has not been entirely on Maliki's side. But nonetheless, the Kurds are very unhappy at the relationship with Baghdad right now. Maliki's going to have to change his tune and do many things differently very quickly, Wolf, if he wants to hold this country together.
James Jeffrey is the former U.S. ambassador in Baghdad. Ambassador, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.